out a lot easier.
Beer. Sebastian, you want to explain why I'm doing this?
Yeah, well, basically, you got to keep your brakes clean. It's a big issue with drum brakes. And after you go wheeling, people forget to clean them out like I did. And basically, gunk gets all inside of here, water, and then you end up having to redo your brakes.
What's the danger of not cleaning them out and the ramifications if you don't?
Well, you just ruin your brakes. Ruin the cylinders, really, because they get full of junk, water.
But if you get dirt up on the top of the shoe, it'll impede the actual braking performance.
The problem is that his truck, being a 71, should have early rear axles that feature a totally different bearing assembly that features a collar. This is a collar that goes onto the axle here. But because this is a late model axle, you don't need this collar. Normally we would have to cut the collar off here. He doesn't have this, so therefore this bearing is completely different than this bearing. So we need to procure late year Land Cruiser bearings and axle seals. You'll notice the seal is much bigger than this seal. So he's on the phone right now trying to track down the proper bearing and seal. This is totally unexpected. We expected to pull out these axle shafts and have them be 1971.
This might become a rocker panel cutting tech day.
Because someone who previously worked on this vehicle, instead of using the paper gasket that's supposed to go between the differential and the axle housing, they used RTV, so the differential is stuck to the axle housing. So we're going to use a jack to break that seal, and then once we break the seal, the differential is going to fall right off. Just let it go right on down to the garage for Sebastian once it starts to come. And there it goes.
Got it?
Yeah. Just drop it on down to the floor. There you go. Good work. Excellent work. What the demise of this differential is that someone did not properly stake this. You should use red Loctite on this along with staking it. By staking it, you want to press this, or pound it I should say, into this little indentation right here. You can see they didn't even really indent it enough to do anything. So it just started to back off. As it backed off, it allowed the pinion to ride into the carrier. Right here you can see where the carrier got impacted by the pinion, and if you look at the teeth on the pinion, you'll see that they're rounded a little bit. I don't know if you can get a shot of that, but they're rounded. We have Federal Mogul part numbers here and what we're going with today. And for the oil seal, it's part number 1959, and you're going to need a quantity of 2. They come 1 to a box, so you need 2 of those. And the rear wheel bearing is a 513008, and you're going to need a quantity of 2 also, 1 for either side, because they're sold 1 per package. And this is what the packaging looks like. Federal Mogul.
Oh, sorry.
And you notice seal's made in Taiwan, the bearing is made in Japan. And even though the bearing was in a Federal Mogul box, it was a Koyo bearing straight from Japan, which is original equipment, which is the same bearing part number we pulled out. Shout out to Fairfax Auto Parts for coming through on a Saturday afternoon. That's huge. So earlier, when we destroyed the early bearing, we took our pry bar between the cage and the outer bearing right in here, where my fingernail is, and we pried the cage up, removed all the roller bearings, and then we laid the bead into this outer bearing material.
And why did you lay the bead in?
To shrink the bearing so that it would be easily removed from the axle housing.
What did you use to remove the axle housing?
Or the bearing we used a Dan Silver Slapper.
A slap hammer with a hook on the end.
Yeah, slap hammer with a hook on the end, otherwise known as a puller. All right. We're just going to give him a little gear oil so he can drive the bearing in.
How are you determining that's the correct way?
The writing is on the outside.
Oyo on the outside in Japan, and you'll see there's a little bit of a it should be, instead of a sharp edge like on this side of the bearing, that side should be a little bit rolled to make it easy to install.
I can't tell, but I believe
But that's the way it is. That's probably about as far as you can go with that. Now you're going to need to use the old race.
Bearing?
Yeah.
Can someone pass it to me?
When the old one is, you pound it in, it's going to want to follow his brother in. Just be aware of that. What we're doing is, this is the rear axle bearing seal, and I'm just applying a little bit of gear oil to the outer edge so when I drive it in, it gives it something to lubricate it so it doesn't hang up when I drive it in. And I'm going to drive it in with this face out as opposed to this. You want this part with the spring and the lift in. And it can't hurt actually if we have some grease to pack this with grease to kind of hold that little spring on. And you also grease up this channel here.
Yeah, that's what I'm making.
Yeah.
This is what prevents your oil from leaking out.
Yeah. And you can grease it after you drive it or before you drive it. It doesn't matter. But I like to put grease in this void to hold that little spring on. And because grease can act as a hydraulic, you don't want it fully packed, so you want to take some of it out so that it doesn't try and push out, because it won't compress, just like water. So you want to leave a void